It's difficult to talk about modern architecture without talking about the legendary Japanese architect Kenzo Tange. Coming from a long line of architects, Tange was known for making spectacular designs fusing traditional Japanese architecture with the modern functionality opened by the use of concrete, such as the Kagawa Prefectural Government Office, mimicking the look of a traditional Japanese tower. Tange grew up in Shanghai, China, being a great hotspot for modernity. The Chinese government Western powers were located there, and its modern industrialism was reflected on the buildings and streets as well as the people there. Tange was sure to soak up that culture. His family then moved back to his hometown in Japan. Later in life, after he finished middle school, he went to high school in Hiroshima, where destiny struck. Tange stumbled upon an architectural competition proposal that showed a multiple-purpose complex that had a hall with its roof suspended by a huge arch over it. This design was created by the father of modern architecture, Le Corbusier. Witnessing such a beautiful construction, alien to any kind of tradition, set his heart to following and pursuing architecture. Tange joined School of Architecture in Tokyo Imperial University in 1935, and when he graduated as a young architect, he needed to find his style. Japanese architecture lacked the originality he saw in Le Corbusier's design, but he didn't want to completely abandon the rich Japanese traditions. So he created his own style that blurred the lines between what would be called modern and what would be called traditional. This was perfectly encapsulated in his proposal for a city planning competition. His vision was to connect modern metropolis Tokyo all the way to Mount Fuji, and along the way place cultural institutions and government facilities, such as a concrete Shinto shrine. He won in first place. The future looked bright ahead, until suddenly. Tange was informed of his parents' death. Just when he thought that this was the end of his suffering, 2 nuclear bombs were dropped on Japan, one of which was on Hiroshima, the city where he grew up in. To immortalize the Hiroshima tragedy, he was accepted to design the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, and selected the location to be next to Hiroshima Prefectural Promotion Hall, now more commonly known as the Atomic Dome. The dome stood 150 meters away from where the bomb was dropped, and yet some part of it survived. The remains of the Atomic Dome will forever remind people of the horror of nuclear weapons. Being selected for the Hiroshima Memorial Museum put Tange on the map for architects in Japan, but that was just him getting started. In 1959, Japan was selected to hold the 1964 Summer Olympics, which meant Japan needed to build some venues and facilities for the event, and Tange was selected to build a venue in Tokyo. Tange was still held up by the design he saw as a boy. He wanted to make a design that uses some kind of suspension similar to the arc holding the roof of that hall. He started with 2 suspension towers, anchored from either sides by giant concrete blocks, to balance the weight distribution of the tower. The 2 towers are then connected with cables, and from these cables are connected sub-cables that make this rib shape. The rib shape then will be the grid on which giant sheets of steel are laid upon, and then completely envelop the building. The stadium has rounded corners. The plan looks symmetrical yet mirrored at the same time, but from the elevation, straight up symmetrical. Most of the building is solid, except for the bottom concrete part, which has ribbon windows. Entry for the crowd are made in 2 main halls of entrance, where they can access the bottom and high rows of seats. For the athletes and other crew members, they have a special entrance, open from the side. Japanese culture is still embedded within this construction through the inclusion of these roof ornaments called chigi and katsugi. Kenzo Tange was completely successful at completely presenting the Japanese culture and his vision of modern Japan, showing it to the world and having it being an icon for the entire world to see the Japanese architecture. Kenzo Tange has countless iconic buildings that he made, not to mention his contribution to metabolism and other great urban designs he created for Japan, and he truly surpassed all expectation built for Japanese architects and cemented himself as one of the greatest of all time.